On the morning of the 2nd of June 1944, a Luftwaffe reconnaissance pilot flew his Messed Bf-109 over Kent at 25,000 ft, snapping photographs of what appeared to be massive Allied tank formations assembling near Dover. He counted over 350 tanks, row upon row of Shermans and Churchills, clustered around fictitious headquarters installations, complete with wireless aerials and vehicle tracks carved into the mud. His intelligence officers would later use these photographs to confirm German High Command's worst fears. The main Allied invasion would strike at the Padacle, the shortest crossing from Dover to France, where this enormous armored force was clearly preparing to embark. There was only one problem. Not a single tank the pilot photographed was real. Everyone was constructed from timber framing, painted canvas, and inflatable rubber. Some weighed less than 60 lb. A team of 4 men could erect one in under 3 hours. They cost approximately £15 each to manufacture, roughly 1,000th the price of an actual Churchill tank. This wasn't desperation or make-do improvisation from a nation short on material. By June 1944, Britain's factories were producing tanks at unprecedented rates, with over 5,000 Shermans alone delivered under Lend-Lease arrangements. The wooden tank program represented something far more sophisticated, a calculated exploitation of the enemy's own reconnaissance capabilities, turning the Germans' aerial photography, their most reliable intelligence source, into a weapon against them. What appeared to be Britain's greatest vulnerability, the inability to hide massive troop concentrations from enemy observation, became the very mechanism through which they controlled what the enemy saw, believed, and ultimately where they positioned their divisions. This wasn't theater for theater's sake. It was operational deception raised to strategic art. Military theorists entering the Second World War held firm convictions about battlefield deception. The Great War had demonstrated that large-scale troop movements could be concealed through darkness, weather, and camouflage netting. The influential 1936 German manual Truppenführer emphasized Übersurprise achieved through speed, security, and operational concealment. Soviet Maskirovka doctrine, which German intelligence officers study closely, focused on hiding genuine strength whilst displaying false weakness. Standard military thinking emphasized making your actual forces invisible whilst presenting a facade of normality. The British took precisely the opposite approach. Rather than attempting to hide 150,000 men and thousands of vehicles through concealment alone, an impossible task given German aerial reconnaissance flew over Britain dozens of times weekly. They chose to hide them in plain sight by creating something so convincing the Germans would look no further. The key wasn't invisibility. It was plausibility. Where the Germans sought to prevent enemy observation, the British sought to control what that observation revealed. The secret was in understanding how intelligence analysis actually functioned. In 1944, German photo reconnaissance interpreters worked in a system drowning in information. A single sortie might produce 800 individual photographs requiring analysis. Interpreters looked for specific signatures, vehicle track patterns, the characteristic shape of tank silhouettes, the placement of support vehicles, wireless aerials indicating headquarters units. They didn't have time to question whether what they observed was genuine. They needed to catalog it, compare it to previous imagery, and produce reports for operational planning. The British dummy tank program exploited this industrial approach to intelligence by creating decoys that perfectly matched every observable signature the Germans trained their interpreters to identify. They ensured those interpreters would see exactly what they expected to see and report it as confirmed. This wasn't accidental. Colonel John Turner, commanding the Camouflage Development and Training Center at Farnham, understood that modern deception wasn't about fooling the human eye at 50 yards. It was about fooling a camera lens at 5 m altitude. His unit conducted exhaustive tests, photographing dummy installations from various heights and angles, comparing the results to imagery of genuine units. Every detail that appeared in photographs of real formations had to appear identically in the decoys. Where it didn't matter, internal structure, weight, durability, they could improvise. Where it did visual outline, shadow pattern, arrangement relative to supporting elements, they achieved near-perfect fidelity. A genuine Churchill M7 infantry tank weighed 40 tons, required 5 crew members, cost £11,000 to manufacture, and took 8,000 man-h hours to complete. Its design incorporated 9 in thick frontal armor, a 75 gun, and complex mechanical systems, including a Merritt Brown gearbox and Bedford twin 6 engine. Moving one required transporters, specialized rail cars, and careful route planning to accommodate its 24T in length and 108 in width. A Type B Mark V dummy Churchill, the standard pattern by 1944, consisted of a tubular steel or timber frame covered in painted Hessian canvas. The entire structure weighed between 60 and 100 lb, depending on configuration. 4 men could assemble one in 2 hours and 40 minutes. 2 men could lift it. A single 3-ton lorry could transport 30 collapsed dummy tanks, compared to requiring a 30-ton tank transporter for a single genuine Churchill. The material cost £10 to £18 per unit, depending on whether high-quality canvas or cheaper alternatives were employed. Critics argued this approach sacrificed realism for economy. They were correct about the materials, but catastrophically wrong about the result. What made dummy tanks work wasn't mimicking every aspect of the real thing. It was mimicking the specific aspects that mattered to aerial reconnaissance. German photo interpretation focused on 5 key signatures: overall silhouette shape, turret configuration, track marks in surrounding terrain, accompanying support vehicles, and dispersal patterns consistent with tactical deployment. The dummies needed to satisfy only these criteria. The reality of aerial photography showed what truly mattered. At 20,000 ft, the standard altitude for reconnaissance photography to avoid anti-aircraft fire, a Leica Fernov Clarings camera using 50 cm focal length lenses produced images where 1 mm on the negative represented approximately 1 m on the ground. At this resolution, the three-dimensional solidity of armor plate versus canvas was invisible. What registered was outline, shadow, and spatial relationship to other objects. The dummy's lightweight canvas construction, which seemed like an obvious weakness, actually solved a critical problem. Genuine tanks created characteristic deep track patterns and crushed vegetation that took days to develop naturally. The light dummies allowed crews to procreate these track patterns using specialized rollers and rakes, controlling exactly what the Germans would photograph rather than hopping natural activity would look convincing. The strategic employment of dummy tanks reached its apex in Operation Fortitude South. The deception campaign, designed to convince German high command that the primary Allied invasion would strike the Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Between March and June 1944, deception units deployed dummy installations, representing the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group fusedly commanded by General George Patton, and comprising 11 divisions poised to cross from southeastern England. On paper, creating a phantom army group of 150,000 soldiers and 1,500 tanks through purely physical means shouldn't have worked. The Germans possessed extensive intelligence networks, conducted regular aerial reconnaissance, and employed sophisticated photo interpretation techniques. Fuseg installations had to withstand sustained observation, appear in multiple reconnaissance photographs taken weeks apart, and align with wireless traffic, double agent reports, and logical military planning. A single inconsistency: dummy tanks appearing overnight without the supporting infrastructure that would take weeks to establish, or installations lacking the inevitable changes that real encampments show over time, could collapse the entire deception. Yet between the 15th of April and the 5th of June 1944, German intelligence catalogued Fuseg as a confirmed threat, allocating 19 divisions to defend paddle forces that would not reach Normandy for critical weeks after D-Day. Post-war interrogation of Abbas Alexis von Rohe, who headed foreign armies west, the Wehrmacht's Western intelligence branch, revealed that German intelligence never questioned Fuss's existence. Von Rauna's 17 May 1944 assessment stated the concentration area southeast of London contains approximately 20 to 25 large formations. The main invasion is expected against the line Dunkirk-de-la Havre. What made this work wasn't any single element, but rather the integration of physical, electronic, and human deception into what intelligence officers call a complete intelligence picture. The dummy tanks formed the visible foundation. Genuine tank crews drove real Shermans through Kent villages, ensuring locals would report truthfully seeing American armor. Wireless operators transmitted thousands of messages simulating a corps-sized headquarters. Double agents fed carefully crafted intelligence confirming Allied intentions toward Kalala. German reconnaissance photographed the dummy installations and reported what they saw, which matched precisely what agents told them, which matched the wireless traffic patterns they intercepted. Each element reinforced the others, creating a web of corroborating evidence too consistent to dismiss. The dummy tank deployment required extraordinary attention to detail. Colonel David Strangeways, commanding our force, the deception unit supporting 21st Army Group, insisted that dummy installations replicate every aspect of genuine deployments visible to aerial observation. Dummy tank parks included representative numbers of supply LRIs, real vehicles positioned for maximum photographic effect. Genuine anti-aircraft batteries protected the dummy installations because undefended tank concentrations would seem suspicious. Crews created realistic track patterns using specialized equipment, then maintained them by walking specific routes in boots fitted with tank track sole attachments. When new dummy tanks were deployed, they appeared gradually over 2 to 3 days, matching the pace of actual tank deliveries. When weather prevented Luftwaffe reconnaissance, crews sometimes refrained from updates, understanding that sudden overnight changes visible in the next clear weather flight would trigger suspicion. The installation near Dover, designated Quicksilver Wand within the Fortitude plan, comprised 250 dummy tanks arranged in dispersed harbors spanning an area of 4 square miles. Photo interpreters examining the layout would observe textbook tank deployment. Vehicles grouped in troops' clusters, 4 tanks, with appropriate spacing to minimize bomb damage, positioned beneath trees or nets for concealment with headquarters vehicles clustered near wireless aerials and supply dumps at tactically sound distances. Luftwaffe